but very hands-on presentation. Yesterday, we talked about how functional buildings like factories, etc., became museums. Now, I'm going to tell you the opposite direction. So how monuments, sort of buildings that have been out of date and are seen as tokens of the past, become functional again, particularly through tourism. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the modern tourism industry makes use of several buildings that a few years ago it would be unthinkable of being used in such a way. When we were in Spain for a cool tour, I remember Martin had organized a meal for us in a beautiful hotel hosted in a monastery in an old convent. And here you can see some other examples from Spain, from Tarragona, the Chiera Dominicata, or the Abbey de la Bussière. It's an old abbey in France. You can see the beautiful Grand Hotel Convento in Amalfi, which was again a medieval convent. And even in Kyoto, in Japan, the Shunkoin Temple Hotel. In Greece, we don't dare turn religious heritage, at least Christian Orthodox religious heritage, into a touristic endowment. But we do use other buildings like mills. For example, this mill hotel in Kimolos, it's a small Cycladic island. And in Turkey, I have been several times at the Four Seasons Hotel in Sultan Ahmet, which is hosted within the premises of an old prison, 19th century prison. So in this process, there are practical and ethical issues. The reuse, of course, it's a way of preserving historic buildings. Because we know that in many cases their maintenance is so costly that they would have been left derelict, unfortunately. However, this process has to, as everything else that we talked about, has to follow specific rules, and we have to bear in mind that there are specific issues in this this effort of transforming the role of a building. Because by changing the use, part of the identity of the building is lost, and here we have authenticity issues. Also, upon the restoration process, there are specific regulations to be followed. Not every architect can do something like that. You need to have specialized people who can restore the building without corroborate, or at least by corroborating the least, the building's flair and original identity. Also, the fact that religious buildings change use might offend some people. There are people who really object to this change of use. A few years back, I followed very closely a project, because my current co-partner, let's say, in Time Heritage is a specialized architect in this kind of things, in restoration of historic buildings. So we followed very closely the change of use at a religious building, which is not Christian, a Muslim religious building, the Imaret, in the north, in the city of Kavala, in the small town of Kavala, which is located in northern Greece. The building, Imaret in Turkish, means a charitable hospice. It was used to host poor people, students who couldn't afford to stay elsewhere. It held a seminary of religious students, etc. This particular building was built in the 19th century by Mehmet Ali, who became a very successful politician and military man in the beginning of the 19th century, and managed to become governor of Egypt. He was originating from Kavala, so he decided to donate this building, among other things, to his fellow countrymen. Unfortunately, the building belonged, Muhammad Ali and his successors bequeathed the building to the Egyptian government. The problem was that the Greek authorities could do nothing to recuperate it and start restoring it, because the Greek Ministry of Culture can only perform restoration on buildings and places that belong to it somehow. In the end, the building was really falling apart. It was like a cemetery of dead stray cats, etc. Nobody could go in and clean it. In that case, in that moment, the private investor came in. She was a rich woman, a rich entrepreneur, wife of a rich tobacco merchant, who basically went there and found, she was of Egyptian origin. We have a strong Greek community in Egypt. Actually, we had a strong Greek community in Egypt, and she originated from that community. So she knew people and she knew the language and she knew everything. She went down to the Egyptian government and managed to lease the building for 50 years. And then she hired an architectural company specialized in restoration of historic buildings, where my partner also used to work at the time, and started the process of turning it into a posh hotel. So this is how it looks nowadays. It's really a beautiful hotel. A few transgressions have been made because actually the architectural office was very, very strict into historical aspects of the building. And this, of course, we can imagine that it was an investment that paid off because it is situated in a city, in a town. The town has a port. There are tourists going and leaving. Also, it's situated on the communication road between Turkey and Greece and Western Europe as well, on the Via Egnatia. This was actually worthwhile also in economic terms. But what about the rural counterparts? There are several hundreds of old buildings, especially in Macedonia, historic buildings that await a solution for their decay. Here you can see, for example, a konak, which was an old Turkish house of some local administrator, which is left to decay. If you look closely, the windows are missing, so it's really a matter of time to leave this building to decay, unless there is a more structured way of finding a new solution, a new role for this building. Some of these buildings even are related to scary horror stories. For example, this is the Kondos mansion in Ano Lechonia in Pilion. Mr. Moraros probably knows it very well. And because the family who built it had a sort of tragic fate, everybody believes that it's a haunted place. I don't know if it's haunted or not. The truth is that despite all the efforts to turn this into a cultural center for the local community, nothing has happened yet. Now, this is a matter of thinking. I told you I'm not going to tire you today. And maybe we can discuss these things at the end of the entire session. Have in mind some questions like, to what extent are we all happy with the change of use of historic buildings? And I don't know what the regulations are in other countries regarding the change of use for historic buildings and their restoration. I remember when we were with Cultura Plus in Plasencia, I think, there was a palace on sale, a Renaissance palace on sale. And I thought this would have been unthinkable in Greece. Even if in the end, you know, it is leased or it changes things, nobody ever advertises that, you know, to put up a sale sign. And a major question to answer, since we're talking about development of rural areas and sustainable development, is what kind of an investment do we want? Are we in for large investments, medium or small investments? And how can the local communities address the cost of maintenance so that they are not alienated from their own heritage? Keep these in mind, and maybe we can talk about them a bit later today. Now I will pass the floor to my colleague Despina Lambada, who will give you in more detail another example of a historic building which has not yet changed function. It lays there. It's an old Ottoman hammam. It lays there. We have been bringing this up to international. And there seems to be a dissent between the archaeologists who say, okay, we have to restore it, but as it is, as a monument, and other voices which say, well, why don't we restore it as a hammam, as a bath, a historic bath? So I will go away, and Despina is on her way.